he's trapped in this like, just 10 more pounds, just 10 more pounds. And he's right, but it's got to be 10 more pounds up, not down. Up in muscle mass, not down in fat mass.
Bringing you a reasoned approach to health and fitness. This is the Phi Life Podcast.
Welcome to the Phi Life Podcast. I'm John Barbin. With me is Brad Pilon, and we're going to talk about ratios today. And if you have success losing weight, the one measurement that everyone knows to take is the scale. You just get on the scale. If you're lighter, most people think, oh, I'm doing better. But this is to remind you that as you lose weight, if you don't have an eye towards building up the muscle and building up the shape of your muscle, which in turn just frames, the dimensions of your body, the ratios from your shoulder to your waist and your legs. If you don't have an eye towards getting those ratios where you'd like them or where we would suggest you would like them, you could be dissatisfied with your results, even though you successfully lost weight, which sounds almost like, how's that possible? Like losing weight's so hard to begin with. And you're telling me if I actually lose weight, I'm not even going to like the way it looks. But I'm saying, yes, that happens with people we've worked with. I've got a couple people I'm thinking of who don't need to lose any more weight, but in their mind, they think just 10 more pounds is the answer. And I already know based on their numbers, they're already underweight and they can't tell. And I'm not talking about somebody's anorexic or anything. They just can't put it together that more muscle mass and actually being heavier is actually going to get them the look they're hoping for. And they're just caught in this little loop where they think it's 5 more pounds or 10. Oh, well, I gained a little bit over the holidays. Now they're just doing this back and forth. And and I get what they're looking at because I see the person. I'm like, I know what you're looking at too. And man, if you just built up your upper back and shoulders, that's what you're after. And I see what he sees. I just don't know how to get the point. I mean, I've told him, let's build some mass here. Yeah. And he's trapped in this like, just 10 more pounds, just 10 more pounds. And he's right, but it's got to be 10 more pounds up, not down, up in muscle mass, not down in fat mass.
It is exactly like you have to imagine sculpting, right? And so if I give you a cylinder and I'm like, I need you to turn this cylinder into like a superhero physique, right? Most people would take some of that clay and they'd stick it on the shoulders and they'd make they wouldn't just make the cylinder smaller and smaller and smaller because you'd still be a cylinder. It would just be a smaller cylinder. It wouldn't mean anything. And so a lot of us when we're losing weight, if there isn't the scaffolding underneath to make that physique that we want, we're just making a smaller and smaller version of ourselves. And the problem is then that has its own look, right? It's kind of a looser with a bit more rolls going. Like you need to take up space still. And we often talk about how, especially with ratios or how one thing compares to another, nothing can be big or small without a point of reference, right? So I like to use the example of Thor, last name I can't pronounce, the mountain from Game of Thrones, right? He got really, really lean and he looks great. And what I don't think people realize is that guy's waist, because of his height, is probably a 38, 40-inch waist. Like it's because he's a big man. So on me, that waist would look very, very, very large, right? But on him, it looks tiny when he's lean because the ratio or the comparison would be his legs and his shoulders. And so it comes in, comes out. It has the look you're looking for. If you look at a lot of female fitness competitors with just a wasp of a waist, you realize they actually have a normal waist. They just have a very well developed glutes, thighs, and shoulders and upper back. So it just tapers into what it would be a normal waist. And that's why some of these people sometimes in just like a baggy sweatshirt don't look very shapely, is because you're taking away those ratios. But if you really want to change the way you look, not just what you weigh, a lot of your time has to be spent on the building up, the building of the scaffolding, et cetera. Now you can do that at the same time. We've already talked about this. You can lose fat while building muscle, right? Your weight may still go down, but you can build muscle and lose fat at the same time. So you can do both. But you really want to constantly be assessing with an artist's eye where things need to be bigger in order for other things to look smaller. And that's the sort of the art of the whole thing.
Yeah. I remember this first occurred to me, or the best example of it was looking at NFL players who Some of them have your classic bodybuilder physique. It's the skill position players, usually running backs, defensive backs, wide receivers, linebackers mostly, who have, they don't carry a lot of body fat because they have to be really fast. So they've got the tapered waist, they've got the muscular shoulders, they've got like the bodybuilder looking physique, the V taper. And I remember, but they're not the biggest. None of those guys are the biggest guys on the field. The defensive and offensive linemen are the biggest guys.
Right.
And I always associated big with the tapered look, with the bodybuilder look. I don't know why, but I just never, I guess because I was always around bodybuilders, it didn't really set in that an NFL lineman isn't going to have the tapered look, but they're enormous human beings, and they're super strong too.
Super, yeah.
And so I always associated strength and being big with looking like a bodybuilder. And so I remember like players like Warren Sapp or that type, like a defensive tackle who's like 300 and change pounds, ultra athletic, super strong, but he kind of looks like a cylinder, kind of like Brad's analogy. And I'm like, really, that guy? And then, and to further Brad's, or boost Brad's point about in comparison, if you just see Warren Sapp standing just on the field, like, it's kind of round, sort of cylinderish. That's the most athletic, biggest, strongest guy on the team. Then you see like a linebacker or a defensive back walk by him and they're like half his size. And you're, geez, he is huge. Yeah. And that's when you realize his proportions in the absence of a comparison, like they're not that impressive on the field. But if you went and stood next to him, he'd be triple your size. And you're like, okay, this is an enormous human being. No wonder he's stronger than everyone. He's bigger than everyone. But proportions really, really matter. That's when I just really realized how much I'm focused on proportions and not overall size. And to Brad's point, without a comparison, you can't. Yeah, they're all big. They all kind of look big until you see them next to each other and you see how much bigger one of them really is.
Right.
And that's, to me, that's always been an illusion with football players, is the linemen don't have the classic bodybuilder physique, but they are the strongest people on the field. And it's always, I still to this day, I'm like, oh, right. That guy's just way bigger than everybody else, but he doesn't have the look that the linebacker has, which to me, that looks like, that's the look I'm drawn to as like, oh, he's got good muscle mass. He's got a tapered waist, but then he walks by a lineman and he just looks small. And I'm like, oh, right. So it just furthers the point that ratios matter, as comparisons even to your own body matter. And then also comparison to somebody else.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell until you have something to compare to.
There's also a really sneaky part to this all, and it's the actual role that muscle plays in the scaffolding. So if you imagine someone on a side view and the shoulders and the waist are both strong and they're pulling this part of the body up, with your stomach then is being stretched flat. So it gives the appearance of a nice flat stomach. If this is weak and the hips are weak, it all rolls into stomach rolls. And a lot of times, you think of someone with stomach roll. I mean, all of us have rolls when we're sitting. If you were to kind of lean back as if you're trying to touch something, the rolls shrink. And that's just the role that having that musculature in your back, in your hips, etc., plays in the way your body presents. And the way your body presents is really what gives you a lot of your self-esteem, right? So it doesn't mean much as if, I go and get a DEXA and I'm up 4 or 5 pounds, but I'm still not presenting well. But if the 4 or 5 pounds are in the right spots and I'm presenting well, it has the illusion of a loss of 5-10 pounds easily, right? I take up a bit more space. So having that muscle plays a role in again, the scaffolding, or how your body is sort of, how everything's hanging off your body, I guess is the best way to describe it. And so it really does change, especially with weight loss. If you're losing weight, but the scaffolding is improving, the look improves immensely. Whereas if you do not have that scaffolding, if the muscle is not sort of pulling you into position, the weight loss combined with a faulty scaffolding really creates a look that people don't like, right? They themselves like, I'm losing weight, but I do not like the donut. I know, donuts. I do not like the way I look, what's going on. And half the time that's what it is. So it's difficult to explain to people sometimes. In order to lose weight, we need to focus on building you up. but it is what gets the most bang for your buck aesthetically, visually, right? In just terms of how good you feel about yourself. But also that tends to be a healthier presentation of a human body, is just one that has enough muscle mass to hold you in a good position. And then that, especially when as we get older, that sort of lack of body control is a really good indication of just the onset of sarcopenia, or the muscle loss while you're getting older. So that sort of collapsing look is not fixed just by losing body fat, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and a good example of that, I was working with somebody who lost a lot of weight, but lost a lot of lean mass, and couldn't quite tell what was up, thought they were in their best shape.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, you're not. You're light. You're as light as you were when you used to be in your best shape, but
Yeah.
you're way down in muscle mass, and it didn't look good. And they were trying to convince themselves it looked good.
Yeah.
And then they built a bunch of lean mass back up. And then maybe 3 pounds more, but 29 pounds more lean mass.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, huge difference. Then it was like, okay, now we're there. And
Yeah.
this person went from 200 down to, I don't know, 174 or something, but then built the lean mass back up and lost a lot of body fat and arrived at like 179, but looking way, way better than at 174.
Yep.
But it was because of what we're saying now. The composition was so wildly different. But to them, same thing. This is another person that thought, oh, just 5 more pounds and I'm there. I'm like, no. You're already too light. We're missing a lot of muscle mass to complete this look.
Yeah.
And it's why we kind of focus on ratios too, like your ratios of your shoulders to your waist to your hips, and you can add in arms and like there's a bunch, but in general, if you're not paying attention to your ratios, that's the scale just doesn't tell you enough to know if you're headed in the right direction. And you might not even notice why. I mean, this person knew better, but the scale was such a strong,
pretty addicting. Yeah.
Well, it's such a strong indicator of progress and success. This particular person just couldn't get it out of their head that they weren't in good shape, or that they just like, okay, I must be there. This is within 2 pounds of when I was in my best shape. But in this case, they were almost 25 pounds less lean mass and 25 pounds more fat mass at the same weight. So of course they didn't look as good, but the scale is such a powerful number. Like but I know this was the weight I was at my best. And most people probably can't even fathom you can be that far off. 25 pounds of fat and lean mass at the same weight.
Yeah.
But you can. And it does not look good. You're not going to feel great about it. And when you recomposition,
it's noticeable too, right?
You're like, oh, there it is. That's the look I was trying to get. And the scale doesn't tell you any of that.
Yeah. The other thing that people, a little secret will let you in, is there are areas of your body that when they begin to waste or lose are indicative of aging. And for men, it is the mass in the shoulders. So when you look at John on camera, right? And John, you got some decent shoulders going on. Your shoulders lie about your age. You do not have a 50-year-old man's shoulders. When you start getting that slope or loss of muscle, even in very big men, when this sort of disappears here, it's an instant tell that's a middle-aged man. Whereas if you can fake that, the same thing with women and the glutes tends to happen, is that when they start to atrophy significantly, you can be like, okay, I can just tell just by you walking by, you're middle-aged woman. There's certain muscle groups that are represent a certain style of age, that if you can maintain them through weight training, et cetera, and maintain that ratio as long as possible, it has the best anti-aging effect visually.
Yeah. And part of what Brad's saying, the other half of what Brad's saying is the thickness of the shoulders as related to the waist.
Oh yeah, obviously. Yeah.
We're just used to seeing people in North American society anyways, just nobody works out unless you hang around with a core group of people who work out a lot. Maybe, I don't know, maybe everyone watching and listening, that's who you are, because that's why you're here. But we all know that in general in North America, we just see people age and they just, muscle mass goes down, fat mass goes up. So we just expect a wider waist and smaller upper body.
Yeah.
Men and women alike, we just expect the middle to start getting bigger and the rest to start atrophying. So it actually sticks out. It's kind of, you notice it right away when someone's older with a tight waist and a wider
Yeah.
shoulders because
And if
we're
it's
so
too
used to
big-
seeing it.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
If it's too big, so if it's a drug-induced shoulders, it's instantly recognizable as not young. Or if it's like a Brazilian butt lift, it's instantly recognizable as like that's not young either. That's different. But if you get the ratio just right, to your point, it has that anti-aging effect.
Yeah, it's
Visual anti-aging.
so yeah, you're talking about the uncanny valley. Like if you
Yes.
have implants that are too big or disproportionate, I'm sure we've all seen them. Oh, you're like, oh, that's not a human body because it doesn't compute. And we clearly know what normal looks like because we all can tell when something's abnormal, like the butt lift that's too big, the lips that
Yeah.
are too big, breasts that are too big, anything that's just out of proportion for that particular body size. It's funny, and we can tell right away when it's right on the cusp and when it's too much.
Yeah.
But we couldn't tell you how we know that, but we obviously have it built into us to know when a ratio is just off just a bit too much.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but the sad thing is, I remember, I don't know if I told this story. We were back at college for homecoming.
Okay.
And do you remember one of our buddies that we used to work with saw me at a coffee shop? You told me this story,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
right? He saw
Yeah.
me at a coffee shop, and I don't know, I was 40 something, whatever size I am now. And he was, same age, but he'd gained a lot of weight and kind of like the typical North American gain weight. And he was
Yeah.
a college athlete, but he just long since given up on trying to take,
Yeah.
just stopped. And then he went to Brad. He's like, I saw Barb, why is he in shape? Why isn't he fat?
Yeah. He was
Like,
so
how
confused what you
He's
were
like,
doing.
how come,
Yeah.
I don't get it. How come he's not fat? And I
Yeah.
remember when you told me that story, I thought, oh, he's everyone from college. Again, he's back for homecoming. So he's seeing everyone he hasn't seen in a while.
Yeah.
And everyone's fat except me, I guess, from his memory. And so he remembered, because in college he was in shape. He was an athlete. And we were all, college shape. We all worked out.
It was a
But
bit
a
confusing
lot-
too because you were a wee bit heavier in college.
Well, right. That. But anyways,
Yeah.
right. So yeah, why? Anyways, so the
Yeah.
point is he's used to seeing everyone just gain weight throughout his life.
And he was trying to figure out if it was like you're like going into acting or something. Like there had to be a purposeful reason for it, right? And that was the confusing part to him too. Is like, what
Oh,
was the
really? And
reason? Yeah.
Not that I was just trying to stay in shape for the sake
No,
of staying
no.
in shape.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of a sad statement that everyone just expects everyone else to be fat. Or let me say it another way. In his life experience, that's just what he assumes. He probably doesn't think about. He probably doesn't even think about it. All he realized was in that moment, he's seeing someone he remembers from college. He's like, well, that guy's not fat. So in his mind, he's like, well, that must mean I'm assuming everyone must be fat by now. It's kind of, I don't know. It's not a great statement on North American society. You don't have to be. Like,
you know,
don't
the
have
weird
to be.
part there is too is that obviously like, when we say fat, right? You're not sitting in a coffee shop undressed, no one else is. So they're not actually seeing body fat. They're not making a comment on your level of obesity. They're actually talking about the ratios. But really, when someone just makes an immediate assessment of someone being fat or not, right? Since they're not actually looking at you and your body without clothes, they looked very quickly, took a quick assessment of ratios and decided in shape versus not in shape.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes to actually to show the importance of the ratios because that's what the decision is being made off of, right? So we have a couple of friends, mutual friends, who are they have very large breast implants, and in a large sweater, they look much heavier than they are because it changes the frame and shape of their body. So the quick assessment based on ratios would be, I think she's overweight. Right. So
yeah,
it's very interesting. We immediately go to the word fat, but since you're not seeing these people undressed or sometimes it's not indicative in the face, you're making that split moment decision based on ratios. And it goes to show the importance of that as a visual clue as to the health of your perception of the health of a body.
Yeah. I remember thinking this particular person, does fitness competitions at quite a high level and gets into really, really good shape. But the implants make sense on her body when she's really, really lean. And it kind of, with the amount of muscle she can carry, it fits the hourglass figure with the shoulders complementing
Right.
the glutes and the legs that are quite thick on this particular person. But when they're in quote unquote off season or just sort of adding a little bit more fat, and again, this person never has a lot of fat on their body. I just mean normal person fat versus like on stage lean.
Yeah.
Combined with the implants, to Brad's point, she kind of looks like a cylinder. And I was like,
yeah.
I was like, oh no, like she almost has to be stage ready for the implants to actually complement her physique versus take away from her physique. Now, again, this is a bit of a specific case. Most people are never going to do a fitness competition, ever get that kind of, I mean, I'm talking ripped six pack, like division
Veins
in the
everywhere. Yeah.
veins, divisions in the quad muscle, like every muscle in her back visible. But that's the condition, at least we could tell when she was in that condition, the breast implants actually finished the look for her.
Yeah.
But when she's in the off season, which is just a kind of a normal amount of body fat, she just sort of looks thick everywhere. And the implants just make her look even thicker. And almost to the point where like a shirt will just tent. And I don't even know how.
That's the point I was getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know how she even gets to the taper look to her waist, given how thick everything kind of seems. So it's, it was a
male
catch-22.
bodybuilders get like that too. You throw a hoodie on an average male bodybuilder and you're like, I can't tell. I don't know what you are. Right. So, I think that to sum it up, the whole point is that if you're doing this for the aesthetic or the look, and especially if you're middle-aged or older like us and you want the sort of the visual anti-aging effect, there is a very good reason to pay attention to the ratios and what you're working on and what muscle groups you're trying to grow. And you should have a good idea as to why you're growing the muscles you're trying to grow and how they will affect the ratios and look of your body.
Right. And I guess to actually put a point on it, for guys and for girls, it's the taper from your shoulders to your waist. And if you can if you can always make your waist look smaller, whether or not that's losing fat or actually gaining muscle on your shoulders, or obviously shoulders a bit of both, it's always going to give the illusion that you look fitter or like you have less body fat, even just by having wider shoulders. And for girls, the image is completed by also having a taper from the waist to the hips too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, shouldn't be news to anyone. Everyone knows this, but just a reminder, if you're losing weight.
Shout out to all our Adonis Venus people.
Right. Just a reminder that if you've been working hard to lose weight and something doesn't feel right, just remember it doesn't look right. Ratios trump size all the time.
I guess it's a great point just to throw it in really quickly here, since it's been a decade and a half since Adonis Venus.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that now, getting close to 50, my experience is it matters more than ever. Like that, what we were talking about back then and in our early 30s was cool, but now it's like that's the paramount importance as you get older. If you want to, that visual anti-aging is right back to everything we talked about with Adonis Venus.
Yeah. I mean, you could ditch the scale and work off of ratios, and that's going to be your best guide, I think.
100%.
All right. I think that's good work. Good place to leave it for today.
Absolutely.
All right. So for Brad Pilon, I'm John Barbin, and that's your Phi Life Podcast.